Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. I think, we're mindful of everyone's time. We'll get started. And thank you all for joining us. My name is Karina Kwok. I'm the head of professional practices and community at the Institute for HR Professionals, IHRP for short. Welcome all of you for dialing in this afternoon and giving us your time to join us on the IHRP SPF joint webinar entitled Tapping the Potential of Our Silver Workforce. It is IHRP's great pleasure to partner with Singapore Business Federation, SBF, on this webinar as we discuss this very important topic, given how Singapore's workforce is an aging workforce, on how businesses can tap the full potential of our silver workforce and support them through COVID-19 uncertainties and beyond. Now, before we kick off proper, I just wanted to conduct a very quick poll to understand a little bit more about the organizations represented in our audience today. Hence, we would greatly appreciate it if you just take the next minute or so just to answer the two short polling questions on the following. So if you can just select one of the options below in terms of what percentage of your workforce is currently 55 years old, and beyond, and will your company be open to extending mid-career traineeships to the older workforce? I can see the poll is active. Currently, interestingly, we have a forerunner. Only about 20% of participants are indicating that their workforce is currently above 55 years old. So we actually have a pretty young organization groups being represented here. We'll give it another 30 seconds or so. So if you guys are just joining in, we're just running a very quick pulsing poll on two short questions. So if you could go into the poll, if you don't see it at the bottom of a console, you see there's an icon called polls. You can click on it. Looks like it's settling down already. Let me see whether people are able to answer the second question. Very good. Lots of people indicating 82% of participants dialed in or who was answering the poll indicated yes, they are willing to extend mid-career traineeships to older workers. So that's really great news. Okay. Maybe just another 6 seconds or so. If you haven't put in your poll responses, please do so. We currently have about 258 attendees dialed in at the moment, and then it's still climbing a little, so we'll just let it settle. All right, I think we can close the poll. So based on what I'm seeing, I'm not sure if you're able to see the poll results, but 59% of you indicated that there's only about less than 0 to 20% of your workforce is currently above 55 years old. And then about 30% indicated between 21% to 40% of your workforce is over 55 years old. So fairly young organizations. And then on the second question, just in case you're curious, the results indicate that quite a overwhelming majority, 84%, indicated your company will be open to extending mid-career traineeships to older workers. So thank you very much for participating in our poll. Let me just kind of proceed forward. I think the next slide over, we can share that on screen. Is just to cover some very quick webinar housekeeping rules. Some of you are already frequent Zoomers, so this is actually a repeat, so I'll just go through it very quickly. Thanks for bearing with me. We will be recording this webinar, and we will avail the recording for download about 1 week post this session after we clear all the respective corporate comms clearance from the respective speakers. You'll notice that we have enabled the Q&A and chat functionality for Zoom. So if you've got questions that as you're listening to the speakers do their sharing, you've got questions that pop to mind, please enter them into the Q&A and not the chat function, because we will not be looking for the questions in the chat function later. So just take note of that. Okay, we can move on to the next Next slide. So really quickly, I think without further ado, I just want to give a quick introduction to our moderator, Dr. Fermin Diaz. Dr. Fermin is actually the Deputy CEO and Group Director of Human Capital and Organization Development at the National Council for Social Services, NCSS for short. We're proud to have him as one of our IHRP Master Professionals, and he sits on our IHRP board. In fact, he has been very involved with IHRP since our early days back in 2017 and actively chairs the IHRP Assessment and Insights Committee. He is eminent in the HR conference circuit and has co-authored 3 books on strategic HR, remuneration, and HR analytics. He has rich experiences in HR and have held senior roles in HR consulting, corporate HR, and also currently serves as adjunct faculty at SMU and also Nanyang Tech University. So Fermin, thank you once again for agreeing to help us moderate this session. I will now pass it over to you to help us introduce our esteemed panelists. Over to you, Fermin.
Thank you, Karina, and welcome everyone. I'm glad to have you all here, and I hope that you get a good value for your time in today's session. I'm pleased to be joined by 3 esteemed IHRP MPs who are going to help us today discuss this topic of how to tap the potential of the civil workforce in Singapore. And perhaps I'm going to start with you, Sheela. If you can just introduce yourself in a minute, and then I want to ask you a question after that. Go ahead, Sheela.
Afternoon, Fermin, and a very good afternoon to everyone. I'm Sheela Parakkal. I'm the CHRO at Prudential here in Singapore. I usually like to introduce myself as an accountant by training, HR professional by choice. Pretty much grew up in a consulting environment for 17 years. Interestingly, as an auditor auditing insurance companies, and it's interesting that I work for an insurance company now, made a career switch into HR back in 2003, primarily because of, as I said, HR professional by choice, an opportunity to make a difference in the lives of others. And over the last 5 years at Prudential, it's been an exciting journey for us, and I hope to share a little bit of that as we get through the panel later today. So, Fermin, you're going to ask me a question.
Yes, thank you, Sheela. That's great. And I know that Prudential has taken the bold decision to scrap the retirement age for your employees. Were there any challenges that you faced in coming up with this decision? What were the push factors, and how has Prudential actually benefited from doing this?
So allow me and indulge me to get back to 2018. Which is when the whole conversation and narrative around removing the retirement age actually first surfaced. So if I had done that poll back in 2018, we at Prudential would have said that less than 20% of our workforce, in fact, less than 10% of our workforce was in close to retirement. And at that point in time, we were pretty much like most organizations, allowing people to extend their contracts beyond 62, etc. Now, 2018 was a pivotal year for us in that we took a hard look at ourselves as an insurance company and defined ourselves as being a purpose-led organization that was committed to innovating to help everyone live well. The word everyone was chosen very deliberately because as you're well aware, in insurance, we're just not talking about our end customers. We work with our distributors, we've got our workforce, and obviously our shareholders as well. Now, with a purpose statement which is as big as that, and for us to truly understand each of our interest groups, our stakeholder groups, specifically in relation to our workforce, we were very keen to get a better appreciation of what the workforce in Singapore was looking for, not just today, but in the future. And being big fans of the work by Andrew Scott and Linda Grattan, the 100-year life, living and working in an age of longevity, we decided to partner with the EIU to actually do a study exactly around what I said on the aspirations of the workforce. And we asked a whole range of questions. And we were fortunate enough to have about, close to 2,000 respondents across age groups, and questions around not just aspirations, but, what were their concerns as they continued to be part of the workforce, and how did they feel that the organizations that they were in was supporting them as they fell into the silver workforce category. It was not surprising to us that less than 5% of the respondents in the age bracket from 55 to 64 actually wanted to retire. And the truth of the matter is that Singapore is really not the cheapest place in the world to live. And there were many concerns around how am I going to afford living here beyond being an earning individual. And that, coupled with the fact that in Singapore, we happen to have one of the, we survived the longest in the world at 83.9 years, right? And that's a product of our amazing healthcare system as well. So coupled with longevity, declining population rates, and concerns about, as I get older, can I live in Singapore? That many of the older workers were raising concerns around, I want to work, but, my companies, are they really ready for me to work beyond retirement? I am hale and hearty, and I've got a good 20 odd years after formal retirement age. I'm sure I can add value as I get into my 70s and 80s. Now, this was an interesting piece of work for us because, as you know, we're in the business of life. And the longevity conversation extends beyond just for our workforce. But we first started with our workforce, and we said that what if we actually removed the retirement age for our people and shifted the narrative to really looking at the value that people bring to the organization, and we ensure that they are treated equally with their colleagues, not just from a compensation and benefits perspective, but from an opportunities perspective, was I guess the challenge that we put forward to ourselves. It was not exactly smooth sailing. You asked the question, what were the challenges? I would say more the opportunities that we leveraged that eventually enabled us to remove the retirement age. So I think the first thing is obviously mindsets that more mature workers are not flexible, they're not open to feedback, and they're not creative, etc. So we had to do some work with perceptions internally to help people appreciate that the mature workforce is as good as their younger colleagues. And we had some fantastic role models to help us out with that. In terms of the narrative on performance and really getting people to see that I could have a second career in Prudential. Just because I'm in a job for a significant part of my years in Prudential, when I become more mature, how do we actually engage and encourage and excite our silver workforce to think about a second career? So not just continue their roles. So again, shifting the traditional thinking of you study, you work, you retire, but rather getting people to consider what they could do simultaneously based on their preferences. And more importantly, I would say that I think the benefits were tremendous for us. The benefits that it gave us an opportunity to encourage our younger workforce to aspire to stay with us for a longer period of time. Getting our younger workforce to say that, there's much to be learned and yet to be learned from our senior workforce. Quell the concerns of our younger workforce in terms of, what's going to happen to me if some of my more mature colleagues are still around and not retiring, by actually creating opportunities for our mature workforce to move on to other roles and kind of, remove the barriers for the younger workforce to progress within the organization, were some of the actions we took to demonstrate that this is definitely a worthy cause, but more importantly for people to start looking at talents from a very different paradigm. and to appreciate the value that our silver workforce continue to bring for us.
That's wonderful, Sheela. Thank you. Aileen, perhaps I'll switch over to you in the work that you're doing at Singtel about planning for the upskilling and reskilling of your mature PMETs in consideration of the future growth areas of the company. If you could tell us a bit about that, but particularly also if you could talk a bit about how do you think this can be a good example for other organizations to follow? What advice would you give to other businesses that want to follow a similar approach? You're muted, Aileen, sorry.
Good. Okay, thanks for reminding.
Thank you.
Good to see everybody, and good afternoon again, and thanks for joining the session. So I think back to, I will just quick introduction myself, right? So I'm Aileen working with Singtel. I think I think you all can have a read so I can get into the question with Fermin. All right. So I'm a bit different from Sheela. I'm a true Brit HR person with some operational experience. So that's my background. So I've been in the field of HR for the past 30 over years already. Okay, so coming back to the question around, how we look at upscaling and reskilling of our PMET, in consideration of the disruption in the industry as well as the emerging technology. In particularly for Singtel, just to give you some background about our workforce construct. In fact, we have more than, I think, 45% of our workforce would be Gen Y and above. All right, and also in terms of the baby boomers, I think I would have more than 22% or 23% of my local Singapore workforce will be baby boomers. And the number that we are talking about, for instance, in the number of employees who are 60 and above is like close to 1,000 for us. So you can imagine that many of them are actually re-employed, and also many of them has been working with the company for many, many years, and of which a large proportion of them, in fact, started their first job and their last job with Singtel in that sense, okay? So you can imagine that with every generation of technology flowing in and out, we have to make sure that our workers actually stay relevant in the face of disruption. So what we do is that, particularly since the digital disruption, we actually have worked very closely with the various government agencies, to ensure that we have very healthy, what I call tripartite relationship in terms of encouraging workers to stay relevant. For instance, I'll give you an example. Back about maybe 5 years ago, when the entire digital disruption is happening at the workplace, we make sure that we identify a large number of employees who we deem as could be a bit more vulnerable in terms of staying relevant in the era, and we want to help them to make sure that they are digital citizens. And how we do that was that we actually partner, with NTUC Learning Hub in particular, and also our union, and do a good 2 to 3 days program around how do we keep our workers, to build that what we call skills future for digital workforce. And how we identify the workforce was actually we look at our employees who are currently in the mid-40s, mid-50s and above, and the nature of work is not necessarily in touch with digital and technology every day. So we have about 3,000 to 4,000 of them, and we actually carve out a 2-year period to make sure that we push everyone through the training. Okay, so last year was the year we had to ensure everyone goes through the training, so that we have successfully completed the program and migrated about 4,000 of the employees to what we consider as digital citizen. The other thing that we have done was that, again, is that we partner very closely with the union last year to make a declaration to invest over $45 million in the next 3 years to deepen the digital skills of all our employees, and it's actually focusing on a couple of things. It's to focus on accelerating our employees' learning and skills development, and also to help them to co-create what we call new skills pathway, all right? And also to look at some of the employees, is whether there's an opportunity for them to transform their roles as well. So these are all very, very important strategy to help our employees to pick to pick up new skills, not just pick up new skills, but also to do new jobs. That's very important, because I'll give you an example. I think if you have a chance to visit our retail shop, you will realize that actually the job of a cashier is gone already. There's no more cashier. So what are we going to do with the cashier that we have at all our retail shops? We have to change their job. So many of them actually change to customer service operations. And I give you an example, even at the call centers, when we are doing call centers, many of our call centers agents are taking calls. But today, the call centers agents don't just take calls. They have to actually do chats. They have to do online navigation. And how do they complement, with the chatbots? When did they come in? So there's a lot of what I call a hybrid of human and technology kind of job scope. So through our entire skills pathway, we actually work very closely with all the different functions to make sure that we change the nature of the job of the people. And the other thing that I thought was also important was we actually launched digital learning. And I think it is really a great breakthrough for us. We launched it last year concurrently with our $45 million investment. And we curate about more than 100,000 of digital learning programs within this platform. And we encourage all our employees to actually do stackable and modular learning, and they can get themselves certified. I'll give you an example. Let's just say if I'm a programmer and I have to learn some new coding language, to support a new customer project. What we'll do is that we build an entire intensive training program just to get this group of people through. So I must say that our digital learning opportunity was made available to all employees, and that helps actually a very significant proportion of our, I would say that our PMATs, our more mature PMATs, in terms of, doing, whether it's learning to stay relevant in their current job or actually to transform them to do another new role within the organization. So maybe just to add one more final point that I want to add is, one of the things that we realize, okay, given that every year we do have about 100-200 of our people actually will retire, all right, at 62. And it is very important for us to make sure that the mindset of our employee is not around the concept of retirement. The moment you get the concept of retirement into their head, the mindset is all about planning to slow down. It's not planning to pick up new skills. So what we had put in place within the organization was really around these two programs. It's called Rethink 50 and Ready. And within 50, what we do is that whenever we have employees who turn 50, actually we will have a new workshop for this group of people to encourage them to think about, for the next, 10 to 15 years, actually you will still have a very long runway. What are you going to do differently? What are you going to learn? How are you going to stay relevant? All right. So planning is important. We do that. And then when for Ready program, it's really all around when our employees turn 60, we get them to start thinking around some of the work-life transition, explore career opportunities, and consider whether do they still want to continue to work on a full-time basis, on a part-time basis, or they want to do job sharing, or they're even exploring some other new work arrangements or new role. So I think those are very important initiatives, but the entire message you can see is really to keep this group of people whole. We have to plan very holistically, number one, and the other thing is that we really have to start very, very early. So it's not, you don't start planning at the age of retiring. That's not what we do. You can see that we actually start thinking about it even at the point when they are in their 40s or 50s.
That's wonderful. That's incredible. That's great, Aileen. Thank you. By the way, for all the audience out there, if you have any questions at all, please type them up on the chat. I'm monitoring the chat here, so if there's any questions to any one of our panelists, please do that. I'm going to run a couple more questions that I have already prepared and that we've received prior to the event. And then we'll have enough time to do proper Q&A. But please type up on the Q&A side or on the chat itself. Next, I want to move on to Jason. Hi, Jason. Jason, if you could also just introduce yourself first, and then I have a question about the work that you're doing there at OCBC regarding the senior population.
Hi, good afternoon, Fermin. It is. Thank you very much for the invitation to join this panel discussion. Just a bit of history about myself. I have spent total of 35 years working in the financial industry. So I started my career in 1986 doing a variety of jobs, and I moved into the HR role in 2015 with OCBC, transforming from a trader to a HR role. So with 35 years of experience, and I can safely say that I'm of a very good vintage. So if I'm a whiskey, I think most people will pay a premium for my vintage years of experience. But most important, when you look at the topic that we are talking about, perhaps I think it's important for us to take a step backward and ask ourselves this question. What does it mean by mature worker? Personally, I'm quite offended by the word mature, because in my definition of workforce, I always told my staff that whenever a staff leave university to join an organization, to me, he's starting to mature. Because in life, for us to be effective as a worker, we must continue to learn and relearn. And therefore, the word mature, to me, is a word that perhaps I'm not a very big supporter of it. So for me, maybe, you can ask me the questions that perhaps I can add some value to the discussion, yes.
Yeah, that's great. You see, OCBC, I've always thought of as a leading example of a business that's always looking to improve its sustainable employment practices, such as building up the workforce within the organization. How have you been able to marry business growth and people growth in the context of the aging workforce?
I think for us, when we look at business strategy, we like to take a long-term view. Partly, if you look at OCBC history, we are a financial institution that is family-owned. Our major shareholders is a family, a reputable family. And therefore, it is run by professionals. And when we look at what we're going to do in 5 to 10 years' time, one of the key things that is very important to us is people. And when I came in 2015, I recognized the fact that we will face severe talent crunch. And when we did the analysis of our workforce, like the fellow two panelists, when we project 5 years, 10 years, we do realize the way the demographic of our population will shift, increasing to the category or segment of 50 and more and above. At the same time, with what we are seeing on the horizon, digital transformation, we know that we're going to face a severe shortage of talent. Either we buy the talent from outside or develop the talent internally. So one of the key areas that we wanted to focus on is to look at the talent we have internally, which is the population that is 40 and above. And like the two fellow panelists, we have put in a series of programs to actually look at it. In 2015, when we launched a program called Life Refresh, we were targeting at employees that's 50 years and above, partly because we wanted to start to ask them this question to plan for their second career, whether within the bank or outside the bank when they choose to do a second stage of the career. And now the conversation we're having within the organization is that if you start a career with OCBC, it is not about having one career. We hope that if you are successful, you could have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 careers. And if you have that mindset in an organization, you increasingly focus your attention and your investment and can making sure that the quality of the people that you have constantly upgrade themselves, upskill themselves, and reskill themselves. So this is the philosophy of OCBC. One of the core values of OCBC is respect, which means that we must respect people irregardless of their race, age, gender, and we must respect the quality of what we do. Sometimes we have conversation with our colleagues, for example, when we look at, especially during a crisis, during a downturn, the value of a staff with extensive experience cannot be more apparent during this crisis. A relationship manager who have gone through various crises will understand during a downturn, how does a customer behave? And when you partner an experienced colleague with a young colleague, the multi-generation workforce will give us a different dimension when we look at business. Because an experienced employee will tell the junior employee how will a client behave and what should we do to help the client and what should we anticipate what will happen. I also have conversations with some of my senior colleagues in terms of experience when we move them to a role that's slightly different, especially advisory role. And when we partner them with a young colleague who is actually doing the marketing, but the person who is more senior in terms of experience is a product advisor. He told me that it's a very good switch for him because whenever they partner to see a client, yes, the younger person will talk about product feature, but when the client looks for reinforcement, whether this is the right product from an investment angle, They look to the older colleagues for affirmation. And that is what we feel that is a critical difference. The other thing that's very important is that we must tap our colleagues with more years of experience to make sure that we have mentoring cultures to support young people. For example, in our learning and development, we call it OCBC Campus, a building that we have that is dedicated to 100% of training. In 2016, when we started to make sure that we recognize internal trainer, we have 117 trainers that is internally for Singapore that train our employees in Singapore. Now we have close to 530 trainers internally. Every year, we will recognize the top 10 trainers per year, and it's recognized by the group CEO, by the top management of the OCBC Bank. In 2016, those who are 50 years and above were 0 in terms of representation. Now, if you look at 2019, it is 26%, which means they are increasingly tapping the wisdom that we have within the organization, make sure that we regenerate and retrain. Last year, we have a winner. He is 64 years old. His name is Clifford. He works in our Operation Technology Department division. He's a project manager, but he is known as a guru for agile methodology. At 64, he's training people on new skills, how to be agile, how to do new things, how to do Scrum, to make sure that things are done properly. And he took advantage of the bank's program because we launched a Future Smart 3 years ago to make sure that we have 4 levels of competency. First, which is the basic level we want in terms of awareness, literacy, practitioner, and master. I remember the first year when we launched the program, we did a 2-day festival at OCBC campus where we invited all our businesses to come and demonstrate the product that they have launched in the marketplace, the first in the marketplace. We have 4,000 participants coming in and out throughout the 2 days event. But what was interesting is that staff, when they were there, they asked themselves this question: wow, there's so much thing that's happening. The bank is moving in this direction, and what role should we play? So the Future Smart was launched in such a way that we are able to actually now, through a strategic workforce planning that we started 3 years ago, we mapped 150 jobs to look at what is the nature of a job. And the question with also business leader, what do you envisage this role will be like in 3 years' time? And then we map up the gaps. For example, like if you look at a trader sitting in a dealing room in terms of foreign exchange, if we automate the processes 100%, how can we migrate the trader to do something different? If he's going to advisory role, what do we need to put in place? What is the learning intervention we need to put in place? And that program will be a 3 years program that we mapped it. So we've done 150 jobs. This is what we try to put in place. In our second stage now, what we are doing is that we're working with IBF, Institute of Business and Finance for the financial industry, Institute of Banking and Finance, where we are now looking at the skill framework that they have set in place, 400 jobs, and we are mapping internally all our jobs to make sure whether we can overlay to see whether there are gaps that we can identify. And we are now trying to make sure that we increase what we call mobility factor, people that can move rapidly within the bank, because we want to increase our rate of internal transfer. What is very important is at the end of the day, people cost in the banking industry for OCBC is our highest cost, followed by technology. So if we don't get our people factor correct, because we know that eventually talent will be scarce. And if we don't respect what we have, I think we are shortchanging ourselves as an organization. So it is our belief that if we do it correctly and we're bringing the right people from outside, we're able to form what we call a professional and profitable multi-generation workforce.
That's phenomenal. That's great. And the fact that you linked it to strategy, that's super. Well, I have a question here for Sheela. So Sheela, somebody's asking a question. Being in the personal service sector, which requires in-depth knowledge of the healthcare solutions for corporate, how do you suggest we can build our silver workforce who were never in the relevant field? How can we teach them confidence, I guess, to reach out to clients that they're going to face? Basically, how do you teach them not just the product content, but how do you teach them skills to be successful in selling?
Yeah, so this is a very broad question. It's an excellent question, right? I think I will start immediately with this individual having the want to explore something new, and that's a given, right? Because without that, organizationally we can do everything to support the individual. However, they do not, they are not confident enough to take this on. So assuming the person is extremely keen and really open to taking on new roles through mobility, etc., I think organizationally we have a responsibility to obviously make sure that they are equipped for the job and they are well supported in being successful in this role. So I guess a couple of things that both Aileen and Jason have spoken about, setting them up with success and particularly with skills that are new to them. I think there's a wide range of skills that we can tap into, but it's not about just the whole range of training programs, but something which is actually very well defined and progressive, which allows them to feel supported on a stage-by-stage basis. So a clarity of a plan and what good looks like over a period of time is demonstration at an organizational level that we want them to succeed. Now, secondly, of course, having I would call a mentor in any form to help them succeed in this role is going to be absolutely critical. Now, what we have found beneficial is the reverse mentoring approach, where individuals who might be of a different age group but have the sufficient in-depth knowledge, actually working and supporting these individuals to really start gaining the confidence step by step is going to be really critical. And we do have examples where while we think that the individual who's being supported, i.e. the more senior individual is benefiting, it's a very nice symbiotic relationship where the younger individual learns from the experience that the other person comes with. I think setting very clear objectives and outcomes and having a performance management system that is very transparent, which allows them to gain confidence as they hit the milestones is going to be absolutely critical. But what really gives confidence is that they're not in this alone, and we're not just doing this as an isolated transaction, but it is with the organizational intent that we want people to work for the longer period of time. You could have your second, third careers, etc. And being able to demonstrate that you're not in it alone and that you have peers who are also following the same path, I find is the most powerful testament for the individuals to gain confidence from their peer group. And really getting them to identify as individuals who are thinking beyond retirement and what comes next. The what's next narrative actually is self-fulfilling because they then ask themselves the relevant questions and they put their hands up. It is a slow burn. It is a slow burn, but I would say that that's where you start, because if that's not achieved, where you start where they put their hands up, and creating a safe environment for them to put their hands up is going to be absolutely critical in the success of anything that you want to do with your silver workforce. I hope that answers the question.
That's great, Sheela. Thank you. By the way, for everyone in the Q&A chat, please put your questions there. And if you see a question there that you like, you can actually like it. On the left side of each question, there is a thumbs up. If you like it, it will pop up to the top. So that may make it easier. So for instance, there's a question here for everyone, but let me just go to the question for Aileen first. Aileen, there's a question here for you. Says, thanks for the wonderful insight. What are the approaches used by Singtel to handle colleagues who are resistant to the changes? For instance, cashier to customer service.
Yeah, I guess, when you talk about resistance to changes, this is really just not restricted to one group of people, right? So, it's really across the board. Whenever there's change, it can be uncomfortable to people, especially if they are being confronted with ambiguity, uncertainty, and the unknowns. So what we have to do actually very many times, a lot of change management and communication to this group of people, we do spend quite a fair bit of time making sure that helping them to take ownership of their destiny. okay? Allow them to actually control their own destiny a lot better and understand what it means, okay? And so options are always on the table to share with them in terms of what are the new opportunities. We'll explain to them exactly, what are some of the new requirements and the new skill sets needed, and help them to also digest a bit in terms of what are the challenges, all right, that they think that they may encounter, and support them and coach them. So we do quite a fair bit around supporting, coaching the people, and also celebrate what I call little milestone and little success with this group of people. Okay, we've seen many of them actually do change, okay? And eventually what we did was that we managed to convert some of the people who successfully actually did a role conversion, and they become role model, and they become ambassador, and become inspiration to others. That's very, very important. Now, of course, there will be situation, I'll be honest with you, that despite all the challenges, it didn't happen. And I realized something, that most of the time when this kind of transition could not happen, actually it's less of a capability. Many a times has to do with the mindset, has to do with their own personal motivation. They just refuse to do it, okay? Which is, I think, back to this question. And we always make sure that we put a perspective, we leave nobody behind. So we will make sure that we train, we continue to bring everybody along. And the company has not given up. We always will tell the employees. But if they have given up on themselves, then I think, it's too bad. And they have actually make a decision in terms of what option they have chosen. So we are quite clear around, some of this position with our staff, and typically, obviously, in the whole process, we do have employees who come back and tell us that, actually, I'm not interested in this job. I think the benefit of being a large organization is that we do give people options to, to be rotated out, all right? So you can try different positions and get yourself ready to be trained to take on some of these jobs. Again, is that some people will have a much better transition than the others, okay? But go back to the point number one that I made, goes back to their mindset, okay? And also goes back to the level of support that we will always continuously be there for the employees. So we have that as, that's how we actually approach it. So I give an example. We, just last year alone, I believe we were able to just do a professional conversion of over 600 to 700 of our employees. We do that every year. So the better years, we could do 1,000. I think last year we cover about 700 thereabout. So this year we should see a bit more conversion as well. So we're doing quite a fair bit of low conversion in the whole process. So far, it might be so good. Always encourage is start with the mindset first.
Great, thank you, Aileen. There are two related questions here that I'm going to get all the panelists to ponder, and maybe some of you can answer. The first one is, can you share how you deal with age bias in the selection and recruitment process? How do you persuade younger managers and leaders who are uncomfortable or resistant to recruit or accept a more senior and experienced subordinate? And I'm going to match that with an additional question that says, so far the examples given by the speakers are internal initiatives to encourage seniors to continue working within their organization. However, there are many seniors now looking for opportunities to continue employment. Any suggestions how to go about getting employed, especially as a senior, I'm imagining, especially with so many calls in social media that companies be encouraged to hire these seniors? Who would like to take that one? If no, I'll arrow somebody.
Yeah.
Aileen, there you go.
Yeah, don't mind, just going to see me. I'm a firm believer of, that age is not the criteria, okay? And I think at the end of the day, what it matters actually a lot is really the experience and the knowledge and the skills a person brings to the organization, okay? For instance, I believe many of you over the call could even be HR or general managers, practitioner, right? Even in my HR department, I have been hiring many people who are actually past their retirement age. In fact, they retire from their previous organization and decided that, they want to do something different and they want to open a second chapter of their career with us. And many of my fellow HR colleagues and my younger fellow HR colleagues actually benefit so much, from the wisdom, from the experience, from the lessons, that these people has traveled, all right? And I guess it takes two hands to clap, and I'll be honest about this. And the younger ones will always want to learn from the more senior experienced one. And very importantly, the more senior experienced must also be prepared to coach, must be prepared to guide, all right, and collaborate, you know. So don't wear a hat whereby I know it all, I'm here to advise you and I'll tell you what to do. So I guess many of our, it take two hands to clap from a perspective is the style. So you have a bit of a style adjustment. But so far, you know, I have to say that we as an organization, we do hire people who retire from their previous job and join Singtel at 62 years old to start their next career. So we do have many of them actually, because of again, the experience they bring to the table and to the people.
Okay. Sheela, you want to answer that?
Yeah, maybe I just add on to what Aileen has said, also Sheela has said. Just now, Sheela, when she mentioned about reverse mentoring, I think, you know, we must walk the talk as senior leader. We must demonstrate that, you know, we must not be afraid that even though if you are a civil workforce, you must extend help to ask for assistance. So I myself, for example, enter into a reverse mentoring scheme whereby I'm being coached by a young person. And actually, when a young person comes to me and tell me that you want to have a session with me, he send me homework, reading material, so that I read and get prepared for the sessions. And in the exchange itself, you know, we talk about the latest technology. He talks about the latest app. What does it do? And I share him my view from a business angle. What does it mean for the business? So to me, age is not a factor. In fact, I don't think we should be talking about age, which is why I always find very hard to accept when people use the word mature. And I think we should throw away the word mature, because it's really regardless of age. It's what you actually learn and what you bring to the table. Like what Aileen said, we do employ people that's above 60 years old, and they come with different skills, different perspective. And I still remember in my previous job in 2008, when I was a treasurer in the dealing room, when Lehman crisis hit us, and I walk into the dealing room, the night before, all profit were lost. But when I look across the room, I look at two sets of traders. Those that have not gone to the crisis, those who went to crisis, they lost money. But the one that came out eventually after 1.5 months are those who understand how things unfold, and those who have experience to teach so that they can actually get ourselves out of trouble. And I think that we constantly undervalue experience, which is something that we must value, especially in Singapore, where we do have scarce resources. And we must not miss this opportunity. So that is my belief. And if I find anybody that doesn't take a person just because he's of a certain age, I personally have a conversation with him. We haven't made it right yet.
I'm with Jason and his last comment about, you know, just having conversations with hiring managers about really how they are evaluating candidates, etc. And I think the journey we've been on since we removed the retirement age, yes, honestly, there were challenges where there were biases that our managers demonstrated. I think we've spent a lot of time and effort shifting the narrative from focusing on ageism to really performance and productivity. And hence, even, you know, working with managers about looking at these things from different lenses, and the reverse mentoring being an opportunity. And I think what is really important here is we've also had people join us, but join us in very different capacities, and not so much to continue providing their experience in the same field, but in totally curveball areas, because that has also helped us or help us shape the narrative with our hiring managers, in that if we have individuals who are ready to take on the challenge and they have the will and the power to learn new things, then it is entirely possible if they are supported as well. So I would just add those 2 points.
Okay, great. There's another interesting question here that has a number of votes. Thank you, panelists. Great sharing. How do you sell to the business leaders in your organizations that matured workers should be retained? What's your sort of ROI on mature workers, or your business case? Maybe Jason, I'll start with you this time.
What I usually do is that when I look at strategy, I usually have a conversation with the top 15 executive of a bank. I did it 3 years ago, whereby I asked a few key questions. One of the key questions I asked is that, what keeps you awake in the night? What is your competitive position against your competitor? What is your progress in terms of digital development? And what is your people strategy? And before I speak to all this top executive of the bank, I rope in and get my endorsement from my group CEO. And when we talk about people, one of the things that came out very apparent is that the biggest worry that they have is that they don't have enough people. So that is constantly on the back of OCBC top management mind. Because when you look at our bench strength, we feel that we're now bench strength. But in reality, things are very fluid. So that is one angle that HR will come in. And what we are hoping to do now is that when we start to have discussions about talent or about capability, because it's two different things. Capability means you build organization capability to do certain things, whether it's digital or whether it's the BAU business. We want to move into a position where we start to forecast demand and supply. For example, the conversation we have for data scientists. In an organization, people have different perceptions and different understanding of data scientists. But we want to have a common language to say that if you're going to start this business, assume you want X amount of number of data scientists. And then what kind of data science you really need to have in terms of competency, technical competency. We'll try to break it down. And we say internally, if we were to move people, maybe we can find certain people. Then we have to reskill certain people, because if your demand is that you're going to start this initiative 12 months from now, maybe we can reskill certain people to a certain level. And if that can fulfill certain level requirement, then we'll allow you to hire from outside. So the conversation is going to tilt in the coming years, whereby we're going to tell the business division that you cannot just go out and hire. You need to look at your inventory first and see what you can do and project your demand and supply. And then once you reach a decision, then we say, okay, we don't have enough. Then our strategy is that where will we hire, from where? So this is what we're hoping to have. And increasingly, it will be a conversation that we need to have with all different divisions that wants to actually grow.
Okay, anyone else? Okay.
I mean,
thank you,
no,
Jason.
I mean, Jason's approach is perfect. Yeah, so nothing to add.
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to ask one last question, because we're going to run out of time, and then I'm going to ask each of our panelists to sort of do a 1-minute wrap-up after that. But I think there's an interesting question here that only got 3 votes, but I find it interesting. So being the moderator, I get to pick. May I inquire if there is salary adjustments for colleagues who are eventually re-employed, be it in the same role or change of role? It's an interesting question that often comes up, particularly as people hit the re-employment age 62, 63. Are companies actually reducing pay in order to retain the employee? What's happening? Can you guys give us an indication of what your policies are?
Well, I mean, I can start first. I mean, in our case is that when you turn 62, if you're doing the same job, you're spending the same time, there's no reason for me to cut your pay. So the pay is the same. But obviously, you know, if the work arrangement has changed because the person has decided to opt for lesser hours, or the nature of job, all right, the role itself that they have decided to do is a very different role itself, then it will just commensurate with whatever that role is. So we're quite clear about that, all right, in our case.
Totally agree. I think same policy with OCBC.
Yes.
Same with you, Sheela?
Because we don't have a retirement age, it's the same. So right person, right role, paid for the job, performance-based, salary and benefits, same as the other two.
Great, there you have it, no change in salary. So perhaps then I'm going to go in the reverse order in which we started. So Jason, I'm going to start with you this time. 1-minute wrap up. What do you think, if you were to tell all of our colleagues here on this webinar, one word of wisdom that they can take back to their organizations, what would it be?
I think the only thing I can say is that, you know, having worked 35 years, I've done maybe 7 different jobs. I think that we must never underestimate the ability of the human mind to transcend and to do different things. Just recently, I read an article on Tuesday whereby there was a book review on a book that's launched by a Singaporean called Leslie Dunker. The title of the book is Alive Intertwined. It's about his history working in Raffles Hotel through his entire employment. He He is the oldest employee that they have. He spent 48 years in Raffles Hotel. What is interesting is that he started his career by walking to the front desk of the hotel and say, I want to work in Raffles Hotel. And then he got a job in maintenance, and he moved to a variety of jobs, and then to front desk, and before he retired. So he saw through two restoration of Raffles Hotel. And then he became very passionate because he realized there's a lot of history in the hotel itself, because there's 133 years of history. So he became the resident historian. He's 81 years old. He is still working part-time as and when the hotel needs him. So the spirit or ability to actually do different jobs in your career is very important. And I must give kudos to Raffles Hotel for retaining his expertise and his passion. So I think we must do our part to pass a message that no single human should be left behind. Everyone has a potential to do something different. One of my biggest frustration in my personal life is my father. He's a welder. He retired at the age of 80. And before he retired, his health was much better than mine. And when he retired at 80, he didn't have a hobby. Now he's trying to find new things to do. But he was able to squat. He was able to do a lot of things. So if we can imagine, if we can keep our workforce working up to the age of 80 as a very rich life, the society of Singapore will be totally different. And that's what we hope to see.
Great. Thank you, Jason. Okay, Aileen?
Okay, I guess, for me, it's a bit of a paradox, And I always say that anxiety and uncertainty at times actually do push people along, a bit further. Just think about COVID-19, I think many of us in our organization was trying to get the organization to participate more in digitalization, and we have programs in place, put together by our IT department to encourage people to use Team a lot more, use Tableau a lot more, use Yammer, use whatever you can think of. And the transformation period actually was 2 years. So they cut us by phase. But interestingly, COVID-19, overnight, every one of us become digital savvy, and we are Zoom expert today, we are team expert. I don't think, seriously, back in January, none of us would imagine that we'd even be doing a conference, a Zoom webinar like this with 300-400 participants. It's beyond our imagination. So you can imagine that, I think, in our current circumstances, actually, in my opinion, don't waste this crisis away, because this crisis actually brings about a lot of, unfortunately, I call a bit of a rude awakening, but at the same time also opportunity, because the entire crisis during this COVID actually built a lot of capacity, right? A lot of capacity in every one of us to adapt, to adjust, to reset, to rejuvenate. So we should not waste it. So I think in terms of, especially with mature workers itself, I know that the going can get a bit tough, but I really learned something from one of my fellow colleague, okay? Her name is Valerie. She's 66 years old, and she has worked 47 years with the company, all right? And when we had a board hackathon, she was very convinced that she could build a bell board, okay? A little board for herself to help to do her work for her. So she just decided to build a system, and she went and participate this board making competition, and she went to do it. And amazingly, she actually won. All right, and she got featured everywhere. Okay, and I mean, of course, when we speak to her, you realize something that really gets in her head was that her beliefs in lifelong learning. Okay, a bit of what Jason said. Her beliefs. She has this strong belief that the lifelong will keep her mind active. Make sure that she also want to continue to encourage and be an inspiration to others, to come along, to learn new skills, to prove to others that even at 66, she can build a bot, okay? And I think she has been a lovely inspiration to many, including myself. And I have to make a confession here. Actually, the last time I went for a serious certification program was when I was 35. Okay, that was like almost 20 years ago already. I just decided that Val was my inspiration, so I just went back and do another certification. I'm going through my entire coaching certification. That's going to take me 1 year, but I'm not giving up because I have to stay relevant as well. So I think it's important. This crisis actually gives us a hard reset, builds a lot of capacity in many of us, so we shouldn't waste it.
That's wonderful. I'm glad you're going back to get your certificate, Aileen. That's great.
Yeah. See whether
Sheela, how about you?
Okay.
Sheela, how about you?
Aileen, very inspired by you and your story of your colleague after 47 years. And so I guess I'll wrap up with two stories, short ones, I promise, Mervyn. One is about Noreen. So you speak about Lorraine, I speak about Noreen. My Noreen, when we removed the retirement age, came up to me and said, Sheela, I am like a bottle of wine and I only get better as I grow with this organization. And she's been stupendous and tremendous in leading the way to demonstrate to all of us about what it means to come to work with a fresh mindset and new accountabilities as she moved from being a policy writer to now training on products for every single joiner that comes into the company. And she does it with gusto, and she does it with an intention that she still has another 20 years in herself to continue to be an active contributor to the workforce. And the second story I share is actually that of my father. And Jason, thank you for sharing about your dad. My dad retired at 55. He retired in a country where, and he worked for the government where 55 was the mandatory retirement age. And while he kept himself active for several years, he slowly started fading because his friends were no longer around and he did not find his purpose in living. And we lost him a couple of years ago. And the fact of the matter is there was untapped talent for many more years had he been given the opportunity to stay on and work in a different capacity. And I think we're speaking to a population that can actually make the difference and hold those conversations with your leaders in your organization. So I guess I'm calling everyone into action for doing your part to energize your leaders.
Thank you to the three of you. That was actually wonderful. Let me add my 2 cents worth before I turn it back to Karina. In Singapore, we're living through extraordinary times, but part of those extraordinary times is that our population is aging at a very fast rate. And so in order for us to stay competitive, in order for us to stay productive as a nation, as a company, as an organization, I mean, you could sort of delude yourself into thinking, well, I'm only going to hire younger people. But the reality is 1 in 3 employees in the next 10 years or so are going to be 55 years and above. And that's going to be the population that you're going to be hiring. So not only the one you're going to be hiring, it's the one you're going to be retaining. Both of these things are going to be true. So if you are in the realm of companies that continue to want to grow, you have to rely on a mix of population, not just on seniors and everybody. But that means that you are going to have to figure out ways to do what these three folks have been doing already, which is how to reskill, how to retrain, how to reposition people, and how to accept the fact that age doesn't really matter. That's the truth. There are biases, of course. We sort of hinted at a couple, perhaps in some of the questions about hiring managers that only want to hire people who are young, or perhaps is there a difference in salary? But that's going to come away with competition, because in the end, these are going to be like I said, 1 in 3 available workforce is going to be 55 and above. And I'm going to close with one personal comment here, since everybody shared. I will too. Of this esteemed group that is up here, of the 4 of us, I'm the only one that's actually already in his 6th decade, so I can speak with the authority that comes with age. And I'll tell you from my own personal experience, I'm loving the fact that Aileen's going to get her certificate. I got my doctorate at age 57. I was the oldest person at the commencement exercise. I was older than the professor that was giving me my certificate, for God's sake. And I have only thrived on it. At age 57, I decided I wanted to have yet another shot at relevance and what else can I do in life and how can I continue to reinvent myself. So I want to speak in this term, not just in terms of you as HR folks that should do something about this population, but you as individuals that one day will also hit your 6th decade as I have, and still need to find ways to be active, to be productive, and to be innovative. One of the thrills I get in life, one of the things I do, because this is what gives me thrills, is I teach, and I teach, as you heard Karina in the beginning, I teach both undergraduates and graduates. And I'm telling you, one of the things that gives me thrills more than anything else is when I teach an undergraduate student, sometime 22 years of age, something about technology that they didn't know. And it just gives me thrills that I am still ahead of the curve and want to continue to be ahead of the curve. So my last word of wisdom to all of you as individuals, as persons, is it's never too late. Keep going, keep at it. We can always reinvent ourselves further. And with that, let me turn it back to Karina.
Thank you, Firmin. I love it. Lifelong learning, right? It's never too young, as they say. So thank you very much, Firmin, for wonderfully, facilitating this panel. And I want to personally also thank each and every one of our panelists, Jason, Aileen, and Sheela, for coming in and joining us, giving us your precious time. I'm just going to really quickly do a quick introduction and pass it over to Joanne Guo, who is the Assistant CEO for SBF, to do some closing remarks. So Joanne has more than 20 years of experience in strategy development and promoting the growth of companies. In her role at SBF, she oversees strategy setting, policy recommendations, advocacy on the key concerns of Singapore companies, the pursuit of high impact activities, and encouraging businesses to continue to transform. And also she works on SBF's research function. So Joanne, thanks again for SBF's partnership and support. Over to you.
So thank you, Karina. Happy to partner with IHRP. So a big thank you to all our speakers, moderator, and you, our audience, for the lively and insightful conversations we had today. Mature workers, as a number of our research has continued to show, and our speakers have shared, are known for their experience, knowledge, and loyalty. So there's consensus that older workers offer considerable advantages to organizations. In particular, the experience, knowledge, and skills of mature workers are highly regarded as valuable, especially in cross-functional roles that require a sound understanding of the needs of internal and external customers. Mature employees also play an important role in developing talent and transferring knowledge through mentoring, leading, and coaching. Resources are scarce, and perceived disadvantages can be overcome. However, mature workers are especially at risk of displacement in the challenging manpower situation brought about by COVID-19. For businesses and our economy, this would mean the loss of valuable skill sets and experience that could define how Singapore could emerge from this crisis. So given this, I would like to urge all businesses to take a longer-term view in offering jobs and mid-career traineeships to mature workers in anticipation of growth and the eventual opportunities. The government has rolled out various support schemes such as the Jobs Growth Incentive to support companies in hiring mature workers. We have heard ideas and practices today through the sharing by Prudential, OCBC, Singtel, and our session moderator, Dr. Firmin. These concepts and initiatives are closely aligned to the recommendations of the SBF Sustainable Employment Report, which calls for businesses to take action and pledge to improve their sustainable employment practices. Two recommendations specific to mature workers in our report are, number one, stamp out age discrimination by championing policies, processes, and programs that help mature employees to contribute and thrive in their workplaces. Redesign jobs to match the profile, needs, and strengths of mature workers. Job redesign is especially relevant in a post-COVID world as we navigate new modes of working, as well as Singapore's workforce of the future, which is expected to be older, but more highly educated and skilled. We will all grow old one day, and it's important that we tackle the change now rather than kick the can down the road. So with this, I would like to encourage all our participants present today to take the SBF Sustainable Employment Pledge. The pledge calls on companies to better their sustainable employment practices, to uplift their employees and partners by making at least one improvement to their practices every 12 months. The pledge and the recommendations of the SBF Sustainable Employment Report are a good starting point for businesses to take positive action and build up our workforce for sustainable business success. The QR code on the screen will point you to the pledge and more information and resources. And with that, I will hand over the time back to our MC, Karina.
Thanks very much, Joanne. We're actually doing pretty good on time. We've got 5 minutes to spare. So hopefully for those 334 of you who are still on, if you could really, just scan the QR code on what you can see there on your screen so that you can share feedback about how you found this session. We always look to improve and also come up with more topics to share with the community. So please do share your insights with us. And I've asked the panelists to sort of turn on your videos as well, so you can get one last shot of them. We're trying to get a group shot going here. So everyone, you know, show me your pearly whites so that we can get a screenshot of this. I hope my team is making sure they're capturing this. Great. I think we've got our shot. So panelists, again, thank you so much for spending your afternoon with us. We really appreciated your words of wisdom. And we will see you guys next time. Stay tuned for future webinars with us. Thanks again. Bye.
Thank you, and great job, Karina and team.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great job.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right,
Take care.
Thank you.
Have a good rest
Bye.
of the week. Thank you.
Thank you.